Hello, this is Varun from the Red Music Box, and let's dive into editing. In simple terms, a good edit should make you feel how you're going to feel after you visit the barber once the lockdown ends. You're going to feel pretty. If you put in the hard work of practicing and preparing, you'll realize how easy it was to get through all the steps that I've discussed in the previous videos. It makes it smoother and easier. More importantly, if you wrote a really good song, if you took the time to write a good song, if you worked on the arrangement and you worked on your pre-production, you worked on your guide track, and then you took the time, you were patient enough to sit and record your song really well, you'll realize you now have a track which sounds very close to a finished product. More importantly, there is not much left to edit anymore, except a few housekeeping things, maybe quantizing the drums to a certain extent, vocal tuning, trying to align the harmonies to sound nice and tight, especially if you're working on a pop production. And you may have some amount of nudging guitar and bass tracks here and there, but all of it is going to be very, very marginal if you record a really good performance. A thumb rule is you decide, you print, and you move forward. You don't keep anything to do at a later stage. You commit everything, you print them down, and you prepare the session for mixing. That's what the editing process is all about. So let's look at what my editing workflow looks like. So here's a little editing session that I want to show how I work with. But before I quickly dive into editing, I want to show you a little bit about file management, which I believe is a very important part of your production work. And in case if you are recording yourself and you're exploring this for yourself, then make sure that file management is very important. So you see how my tracks or my sessions are named here. I name it in the order of my workflow. So you see that there's a drum tracking, then there's a drum edit session, and there's a layering session. Sometimes I choose to layer the samples and stuff if I want to work with right at this stage. Sometimes I may choose to do it in the mix stage. Then there's a guitar tracking, bass tracking. So I've gone in the order of which I would like to work with. And here is a tracking session that I have pulled out. And you can see that when I'm tracking, I'm using different playlists to capture different takes and performances. There's nothing on this playlist. I moved it. There you go. There's the ending parts from here. There's some extreme outro from here. The chorus is taken there. And I've kind of comped a bunch of it. I've kind of put it here in some sense. So to begin with, let's just give it a listen. Here are the raw tracks. And just to show you guys, there are no plugins whatsoever. This is the way we recorded it. Let me just open the click as well so you can kind of hear it. There we go. Let's play this. So this is a really good performance. This is played by our drummer Joel Millen Baptist. I really love his drumming. He's really good in a studio. He's grown to be so comfortable in a studio environment. So he usually plays pretty tight. But I could use these takes the way they are, but I sometimes still choose to do just a tiny bit of Beat Detective and kind of try to edit things out a little bit. So let me show you how to work with something like this. Let's put it on grid mode so that when you're selecting stuff, it's snapping to bar. So I'm going to select it from there, and we're going to do it till bar number maybe 28. Let's do bar number 28. Let me just zoom in because I can't see bar number 28 here. There you go. Right? So what we're doing is we're going to select this region like that. A very quick way of doing Beat Detective. There are some people who like to add only the kick and snare to capture the selection of kick and snare and use that to trigger the analysis or where the snapping points should be sort of analyzed, and then they kind of apply that to the rest of the tracks. But even if you don't want to do that, you want to just straight up go and apply it, you can still do that. So what we do is we go to clip separation, you capture the selection so that so that the bars that you have selected here is reflecting in this window. And once you have done that, you analyze this. The moment it completes analyzing, you will see it adds these little lines, which tells you where is it exactly going to snap. And you can see it selected all the kick and snare hits and a couple of hi-hat hits as well, in case, so that all your stuff is pretty much in time. So once we select that, you can hit separate. If you want to reduce the amount of analysis it's done, you can use the sensitivity bar here and you can do it. You can also manually click and remove some of the things if you want to. And then we go and conform this. Again, make sure that the same bar numbers are captured in the selection window. And then you hit conform. You see everything kind of nudged a bit. And you can see here, there are gaps here. It's kind of snap things to place without stretching the audio. That's what I want to kind of pay focus to. And then you can select edit smoothing. And we don't need 15 milliseconds, maybe 10 milliseconds is enough. You fill the gaps and you crossfade. So now when you listen to this, it sounds really good, except a couple of snare hits here and there. So you can kind of hear it's sort of like flamming in that section a bit. So when that happens, what I do is I just usually select that a little and try and maybe put it in slip mode again and just drag this back a little bit like that. That's it. That fixes it. There you go. So it's not exactly, if you see, it's not exactly on bar, but it's fine. I mean, I'm not looking at perfection. Remember, I just want the right feel. Sometimes I don't do this. If the performances are really, really good and it feels so good naturally, sometimes there could be certain fills and stuff that just, that's really perfect the way it is. And I don't exactly go and edit every single thing out. So I try and weigh my options accordingly. So that's kind of how I go about editing my drums. And once I'm done with the drum editing, this is sort of what the session could look like. Eventually, you'll see everything like a barcode when you zoom out. That's sort of how it looks. And after this is done, I go ahead, I select the tracks, select the group, and let's zoom out here. Select all the way. Yeah, make sure we've selected every little thing, and we go to edit and we go to consolidate clip, and that's it. So when we consolidate clips, what it does is it commits all the edits that we have done, removes all the chops and everything, and consolidates it into one single file. So before consolidating, make sure that you have applied crossfades to everything. Otherwise, it will commit to the tracks without crossfades, and you will hear pops and clicks while you are playing it back. When it comes to guitar and bass editing, which is the next thing that I usually get into, you can see here in this song, the guitar takes were done. I was writing parts as I was tracking the guitar. I was trying to do layers. I had the main layer in place. I knew what the acoustic guitar was playing, and I knew what my main electric guitar was kind of playing. But I wanted to try different layers and see what I could achieve through this. So what I did was I tried out different ideas, and I was capturing them as I was trying it out. So which is why you see each of these recorded in different segments, like small bits here and there. And also I trimmed out the unnecessary bits to remove the noise, because I was using a little bit of a higher gain, so it had a bit of the humming noise that usually you get on electric guitars, especially when you have high gain. And otherwise, I've just done clean cuts, making sure that I've not cut it in the middle of a region anywhere. And in case, simple crossfade here, and stuff like the very basic things. And here, simple crossfades here, very basic things. That's kind of what I'm looking at in an edit session, because the point is, when you're mixing the track, you shouldn't be doing these things. You shouldn't be chopping your track and trimming your regions. You shouldn't be applying crossfades. You shouldn't be listening to different takes to analyze which is the better take. You should not be working on aligning your bass and kick track, for example, or aligning all the vocal harmonies, or aligning the guitar layers, or whatever it is. All these things are better addressed in an edit session or an edit stage, which is why I prefer doing these things in a separate stage altogether, so that when I'm mixing, I'm purely focusing on getting the song to sound as good as it can get. So my focus is just that. Even for bass, I've just muted out this one layer here. I felt I didn't need the SansAmp in this particular section. I just wanted a clean bass track, and then there's a SansAmp track otherwise running through the other sections. Let me just make you listen to this real quick, so you kind of get a feel of what's happening here. And again, the trick is that get a really good sound. Don't bother using too many plugins. Try to get a really good sound right off the source. That's kind of the idea here, and it's very similar with electric guitars. So I feel if you start getting your raw tracks to sound really good, and your edits are sounding clean, and you don't have any clicks and pops and stuff, and they're well aligned and stuff like that, it becomes really simple and easy how you go. In this project, when it comes to the vocal tracks, I didn't record the vocals here. I received the vocals, I imported them into the session, and all I had to do was run it through Melodyne and do a very, very minimum tuning, like select all the notes, the entire region for that matter, and just do a little bit of a macro tuning, maybe run it by 50% or so, and most often it fixes most of the tiny things. If you have a really good singer, you don't want to do too much of pitch correction, because it loses its feel and the naturalness that the singer sings with. It often tends to move notes and tries to make it as perfect as it can, and that's, I mean, again, the aim is not perfection. We're looking at retaining the character and the feel of the original performance, and we're only trying to fix things that are really seem to be wrong, and it's kind of popping out like a sore thumb, and you can hear it out very clearly. Here's another session that I worked and produced in the studio for another artist called Bhavna again. I think I've showcased her work before. Here's a little small example of the programmed drums. So you see the drums has a little bit of that live feel because I've not quantized it to 100% strength. Now if I move this to 100% and now you listen to it, it feels a little more mechanical. Bring the strength down, let's say about 30%. What happens now? I feel like it has that sort of natural drag, that the way I programmed it using my MIDI controller. And if you sort of zoom in and see here, you see some notes are a bit ahead, and this one is way ahead. Some notes are a bit delayed, like the one here. This one is also slightly delayed. This one is delayed. This one is a bit ahead. I feel that sometimes adds to that naturalness to it. So if you're programming drums, then I would definitely say do not quantize it to 100% strength. You will retain a lot better feel if you do that. Now, with regards to the second step, after I get the drums and percussions right, is I usually move on to guitars and bass. Now, in this session, the guitars were completely tracked live, and I practiced out the parts and I played them out in one take. I didn't want to do too many cuts and stuff like that. I prefer doing it that way when I'm tracking by myself. The bass, I programmed it and I've bounced it into audio. Same thing with all the orchestration parts. They have been programmed and bounced into audio. So there's not much to edit on this except adding some fades in the beginning and in the end. You see, if you get like that's what I meant when I said you practice things really, really hard and you work on it, and then you come back and you when you enter the studio and you start tracking, you realize this is an honest example of how well your track can sound if you practice your stuff, make notes, and then play your parts. That way you can get it right in 1 or 2 takes without having to chop things too many times in the middle of a region. And as far as vocals are concerned, we again recorded in chunks. I'm a huge fan of recording parts in chunks. I don't like people doing one line at a time. I think it ruins the feel. So I prefer doing like an entire verse or an entire chorus at the same time. And also you can see the harmonies are placed really tight and well here to give it a nice natural feel. Let's just quickly play the vocals for you just to get a feel. If I just solo out the vocal tracks for you. So we worked on a bunch of different harmonies and stuff in the studio, and this is kind of how we tracked. You have to get a clean tracking. Now, even if you want me to mute all the effects and just show you what it sounds like without anything, there's only reverbs happening on the main vocal bus. Everything else is super fairly dry. You see I've ran a Melodyne on the main vocal. All the other thing has a normal pitch correction default plugin from Logic with default settings. Because she was a really good singer, I didn't have to do much at all. I just left it there just in case there was something and I wanted that whole thing to sort of drag in place. There's a little bit of EQ and compression here. So I'm going to mute all of that. Let me just pull everything out for you guys so you get an idea of what this sounds like. Let's go back, play the same section here. चैन मेरा दिल करे बातें तेरी चुरा जाए. So this is really the sign of getting a good singer in the studio or a good musician in the studio. You get nice confident takes, and as a producer I work with every artist to make sure I get nice good takes. I push them hard till they are able to perform their best. Okay, well, I hope that was helpful for you guys, and you got a gist of what the editing workflow looks like for me. And I would definitely say there are tools that will help you fix your performance in a post-production stage. But having said that, my 3 reasons why I believe you should not be depending on these tools. Reason number 1, you are going to compromise on your own musicality. Your musicianship is going to be highly compromised, and you're going to rely on these a lot, which is not a good thing at all. If you can try and practice your parts really hard, work on your playing, and come and play really well and confidently in a studio, the feel that you add to those performances is definitely better than the edited ones. Second thing, if you are going to start editing a lot in a studio to make your track sound good, it's not going to be the case when you go live. It's going to show up a lot, and your albums are going to sound really well, but your live performances are going to sound really bad. And I don't think that's how you want it to happen. Now, the solution to that is not to say I will not do any editing on the album, because you don't want your album to sound bad. But the solution is to work hard and practice so that you push your live playing, your musicianship really to a level where you're not only able to perform well in the studio, but also be able to perform well in a live scenario. And reason number 3 is when you use these editing tools, there is always some amount of artifacts. Now, sometimes we are able to hear these artifacts, but sometimes we can't. But that itself in a way is a reason to say that don't overuse these things, because when you start mixing it, you may start noticing these artifacts a lot more clearly. And especially when you master the track, some of these things starts jumping out a lot more clearly around that stage. So I would say be very, very careful and wise when you're using these tools, and try to use them to as minimum ability as possible. Of course, there are always projects where you have to sometimes push yourself when it comes to editing, either because the tracks that you've received are not up there. The clients were not sending you recordings that were done really well. The musicians were not so good in the studio. The reasons could be plenty. But see, if you have the control of the recording process, then try and get it right in the first place itself. So I hope you liked it anyway. So do the usual things. Hit the subscribe button below, ding the bell so you're notified when there's new content available, and also leave your comments below. Let me know what are some of the things that you utilize in your editing workflow. And more importantly, guys, thank you so much for supporting this channel and being with me. I'll see you soon in another video. My name is Varun from the Red Music Box, and don't forget to create, play, and record.